had always wanted to be a dentist, of all things, and after going to Johns Hopkins University and spending a summer at a science camp in West Virginia in the wilderness, I fell in love with nature, and I decided I wanted a little bit more than dentistry. I thought it would be nice to be a physician. And actually what I wanted to do was to trade my services for chickens or vegetables or anything else to keep me going, living out in the country and have a self-sufficient lifestyle. Things didn't really work out that way. I ended up graduating Phi Beta Kappa from Johns Hopkins and went on to medical school at UC San Francisco, and then took training in family practice afterwards and went into the Indian Health Service. UC San Francisco was a very high-powered school and considered one of the best in the world. And I was trained very rigidly in the scientific method of medicine. But somewhere along the third year of school, I became depressed, thinking, what are we doing to patients? I saw patient after patient admitted to the hospital, having workups and tests and procedures, many of which were invasive, and it didn't amount to much to help them. It was a big bill, and a lot of them were hurt by it. And the cancer treatments that I saw were a disgrace, and they still are. I decided to stick with it, even though I thought of getting out, because I had thought, what am I going to do to really help people? And I came to see that what we were doing to our patients was exactly the same thing as we were and still are doing to the planet. A slow pollution type destruction of our planet and our people, and that affects the body and the health. And we just treat it with more pollution, more chemical drugs, instead of addressing causes. But I wasn't well trained on how to address causes. I was only trained on how to cover up symptoms with petrochemical pharmaceuticals. But I kept an open mind, and one thing led to another, and finally by 1982 I attended an amazing conference on acupuncture where I saw all walks of life in healing. Homeopathy, herbs, chiropractic, acupuncture, nutrition, among others. And I got shaken down, and I realized that there was another path I had to go, and I put both feet across the stream and went with it. I saw that as I was trained to treat disease was essentially being, in truth, a pimp for the pharmaceutical industry, peddling their wares and not really addressing the fundamental cause of disease, which I came to realize were three main ones: malnutrition, toxics, and stress, and a few other ones that fit in there that we would call lack of exercise, genetics, and perhaps a few other things. So I started blazing my own path after that in Alaska. I left the Indian Health Service realizing that I couldn't do that type of medicine in a government-run hospital that was edited by other medical doctors very close to such concepts. I started a private medical practice in Anchorage and just sucked up all the information that I could on alternative medicine, especially nutrition. And I saw that many of my colleagues were taken out by the establishment because they differed. They were doing what we would call alternative or complementary medicine, and it was not the standard of care, and they lost licenses. And I thought eventually it might come to Alaska. So in the years 1989 to 1990, I petitioned the Alaska legislature to pass a bill protecting alternative medicine in this state, and we were successful in the first run. We were too late in '89 in the session. In 1990, with a monstrous, overwhelming support from the population of Alaska, we got a bill passed simply states that the medical board cannot find us incompetent for practicing unconventional or experimental medicine in the absence of demonstrable physical harm to a patient. And we became the first state to get statutory protection for unconventional, complementary, or alternative medicine in the history of the country. Since that time, I have expanded on what I do. I was already into a field called oxidation medicine, and I have furthered that. I do ultraviolet blood irradiation therapy and teach that before national audiences. And I also do ozone therapy and hydrogen peroxide, chelation therapy, nutrition, and I try and remain abreast of all the latest things that are out there in the exploding field that we call complementary medicine, and our medical center, in fact, is called Complementary Medicine Center. Okay. We'll first talk about oxidation therapy. I'm really happy to let you know that our clinic is one of the few that we know of in the world that has available all of the oxidation therapies, including hyperbaric oxygen, intravenous hydrogen peroxide, ozone, and ultraviolet blood irradiation therapy. I've been doing these for a number of years, and these are really my favorite therapies to do because they're completely safe and they treat a wide variety of problems. They are a non-specific treatment for a wide variety of both specific and non-specific diseases because they augment the immune system, they help oxygen delivery, they help repair tissues, and they activate body's enzymes and mitochondria for energy production. The work goes back over 60 years on ultraviolet blood irradiation therapy when serious and even life-threatening infections were cured within hours of a single or a couple treatments with ultraviolet therapy. It's unfortunate that it was lost. It was lost due to pharmaceuticals. Doctors just felt it was easier to give a pill or an antibiotic by mouth or IV. It turns out that we're seeing the catastrophe of that mentality because the germs are getting resistant and the drugs are failing. You can use pesticides on insects, but that doesn't work. Within 10 years they'll be resistant and you've contaminated the environment. We're doing the same thing with our patients. These treatments help augment the immune system so that the body itself can recover from the conditions. These therapies are wonderful for chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, circulation problems including coronary artery disease, toxicity. They help to detoxify the body, and they can augment treatments for cancer and ameliorate a lot of the problems from chemotherapy and radiation. The next topic is nutrition. As I mentioned earlier, the cornerstone of how I approach patients are the three fundamental causes of disease: malnutrition, toxics, and stress. The majority of Americans, in my opinion, are overfed but undernourished. They have too many calories because obesity is growing, yet U.S. government studies and other reports indicate that the majority of Americans are significantly nutritionally deficient in essential minerals and vitamins. They also, in large part, might be eating the wrong foods. I used to teach people to eat like me, and I found out it didn't work. I'm largely vegetarian, but not completely, and it works for me and my metabolic type, but it doesn't work for everybody. We have learned that people's metabolisms are different, and there are physiologic ways of determining that without too much guesswork, and we can put people on the right diet for their metabolic type, which can help balance their pH and get the right foods in for who they are. For example, American natives, which we have a large population up here, have traditionally been meat eaters. That works very well for them. But when they eat a white man's diet, they do very poorly because it's loaded with carbohydrates and processed foods. If they ate their native diet, which is a lot of flesh, fat, might seem like it wouldn't do a lot of good for them, but it does do them very well. We evaluate people for nutritional deficiencies, and we try to get them to eat right and provide nutritional supplements where indicated to help them out. We also provide nutritional supplements not only to replace nutritional deficiencies, but there are thousands and thousands of studies indicating the value of dietary and nutritional supplements in fixing disease, ameliorating symptoms, and correcting problems. This is the foundation of nutritional therapy. The next topic is pain. I see a lot of chronic pain patients, both acute and chronic. There are reasons that people have pain, and generally it's not a deficiency of a nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drug or a narcotic. Pain is the body's warning mechanism that something is not right, something is amiss. there are mechanisms of determining the cause of pain and not just covering up the symptoms. One of the therapies I do is called neural therapy. In neural therapy, we are looking for interferences in the autonomic nervous system that could be a scar, a root canal, a pulled tooth that left an infection behind, or a subclinical problem that you can't even imagine that has been around in your body for years and you don't even know it's there. But its effect on the nervous system is very profound. The interference reflexes into the spinal cord and can come out at the same level or any other level, causing chronic pain or an organ dysfunction. When you find out where the interference is, it's very, very easily treated and permanently. It could be something as simple as a scar on the skin. It could be a root canal tooth that's causing the interference. It could be a dead tooth or a hole left in the bone where a tooth was pulled. It could be an old trauma, an old fracture. Something that you wouldn't even think of can be causing a chronic problem. I also do a therapy called prolo or proliferative or joint reconstruction therapy. There are books written about this. When somebody has an injury, the main problem is not an injury to the bone but torn ligaments. Ligaments don't heal very well. They don't have a good blood supply. Bones heal, muscle heals, but ligaments don't. We know that people who have a fall or a whiplash injury can go on and have years of chronic pain, and we don't really, until recently, we didn't understand why, but now we know that it's because of unstable ligaments causing unstable joints. That makes the muscles go into spasm to protect the joint, and that's pain. The joint itself protects itself by laying down calcium to restrict motion, and you get arthritis. Joint reconstruction therapy involves the injection of small amounts of agents into the ligaments that help them regrow and reattach to the bone so that they provide stability to the joint, and when that happens, pain can go away or be significantly reduced. This therapy is effective in necks, in low backs, and every joint of the body. Anywhere there's a joint, there is a ligament that attaches one bone to the next. The next topic is chelation therapy and diseases of circulation. There are hundreds of doctors around the country who do chelation therapy. This therapy was found 30 or more years ago to be quite effective for circulation problems, but it's never been accepted by mainstream medicine. Coronary artery disease and diseases of circulation have many, many causes, and medicine is only coming around to understanding them perhaps 10 or 20 years after the alternative medicine doctors have been understanding them. The causes generally revolve around what are called free radical pathology. Free radicals are molecules that have an unpaired electron, and they can scar blood vessels. In fact, they can also scar DNA and lead to cancer and other chronic conditions. Most everybody has heard about antioxidant vitamins. I prefer to call them free radical scavengers. They help the body's defenses against these naturally occurring sparks. These sparks occur all the time, and to me it's analogous to a fire in a fireplace. If it's putting out a lot of sparks, those sparks can land on the rug and burn a hole in it. But if you put a big screen in front of the fireplace, it catches those sparks and you don't burn a hole in the rug. Or you can get cleaner burning wood. The antioxidants or the free radical scavengers are like the screen. It catches the sparks before it burns a hole in your rug or your cell. And if you get cleaner burning wood, you put out less sparks. It's my belief that chelation therapy, which is an intravenous approach with vitamins and minerals and a compound called EDTA, which removes heavy metals, we get cleaner burning wood, less free radical production, and the body then can begin repairing itself from a variety of problems, especially vascular disease. But vascular disease has a lot of other causes that modern medicine, again, is just coming around to looking at, but the average physician doesn't recognize it or doesn't know about it, and he probably will in 5 or 10 years. These include high insulin levels from eating too many carbohydrates. That's one of the biggest causes of vascular disease. Elevated homocysteine. That's a chemical that's related to an inadequate utilization of 3 B vitamins, B6, B12, and folic acid. It's measurable in blood. High levels of iron. The reason why women are protected from heart disease is not because of ovaries, but because of a uterus. They shed iron every month. And when they stop doing that, the risk of heart disease catches up to that of men. High levels of iron cause a rusting process in the body, and the iron can be removed very easily and very inexpensively. We all know about cholesterol. It's my opinion that cholesterol is not the bad guy, but it is how cholesterol is used by these other factors in the body. There are potentially bad forms of cholesterol. This would include certain forms of LDL, low-density lipoprotein, certain forms of the LDL, mind you, a compound called apolipoprotein A and lipoprotein B. If these are elevated, a person might have elevated risks for heart disease. Also, lack of the free radical scavengers, lack of exercise, and there are other factors that deserve to be looked at. Chronic inflammation, which can cause arterial disease, and elevated clotting capacity of the blood. All of these can be measured objectively and modified to reduce a person's risk of vascular disease, and chelation therapy is one of the best treatments to modify most of the risk factors, but not all of them. The next topic is hormones and anti-aging medicine. It's turning out that we can probably slow the aging process. We're never going to stop it. 3 things in life are true. We're born, we pay taxes, and we die. But we can probably slow down the degenerative process. There are tests now that we can measure hormones in people. We can measure testosterone levels in men. Low levels of testosterone are related to sexual dysfunction and especially heart disease. Women have problems with hormones in menopause. There are natural hormones that can be used that run a less risk of horse estrogens or synthetic chemicals. Growth hormone is a possibility for some people, but growth hormone has its problems also. The idea behind anti-aging medicine is to reduce damage to the body caused by free radicals and to try and naturally increase hormone levels to the most youthful levels possible, because declining hormone levels are associated with accelerated aging. In selected cases, we can judiciously use natural hormones to help replace low levels, and we see sometimes enormous gains in a person's functioning overall. Next topic is colon hydrotherapy. That belongs with the detoxification strategies. Colon hydrotherapy goes back literally thousands of years, and it was reported to be used by Egyptians. There are many articles in the American literature talking about colon hydrotherapy treating conditions ranging from arthritis to depression in the 1920s when it was employed in hospitals. The colon is the repository for toxic waste material. New evidence is showing that bacteria themselves and bacterial products can leak across the colon wall, get into the general system, and cause significant disease. There are more bacteria in the colon than there are cells in the body. Some of these bacteria can make proteins on them that look like us but are not us, and the immune system sees it and goes after it and can attack our own tissues as well, and this can be an instigating factor for autoimmune disease. Toxins from the colon are implicated in diseases ranging from arthritis to Parkinson's disease. The bacterial toxins can hit almost any cell of the body and cause very significant damage. Most everybody has toxic colons because of a very poor diet, lack of fiber, and lack of good eliminations. Colon hydrotherapy is a very safe treatment where we wash the colon out with water, and in our particular clinic, after we have washed the colon out, we also put ozone in, which further cleanses the colon and gives a good boost of oxygen and ozone to the liver to help detoxify more tissues and get oxygen into the system. I've been asked to talk more specifically about oxidation therapy and especially ultraviolet blood irradiation therapy. Virtually everything I tell you about this therapy, ultraviolet blood irradiation therapy, also is the same for intravenous hydrogen peroxide or ozone therapy. All of them are lumped together in a topic we call oxidation therapies, and they all have very similar but not identical effects on the body. Many years ago, a scientist named Knott, K-N-O-T-T, found that if he took a small amount of blood out of a person or an animal and irradiated it with ultraviolet C energy and gave it back to the organism, whether it was a dog or a human, infections would go away in hours. Sometimes even the patients were getting better in minutes. In hospitals, patients were dying of horrible infections, and this was before the age of antibiotics. And the effectiveness rate of this treatment in just usually 1 or 2 treatments was 50% for comatose patients, patients about to die, and 98 to 100% effective for moderately advanced infections or less advanced infections. It was found to be effective equally for viral disease like polio and viral influenza, as well as bacterial infections. The treatment is done by taking approximately 6 ounces or perhaps 7 ounces of blood from the patient and running it through an ultraviolet light and then giving it back to the patient. This also can be done with ozone. If it's done with intravenous hydrogen peroxide, a small amount of peroxide is given over a slow drip intravenously. These treatments are exceptionally safe. The American literature back in the 1940s reviewed thousands of cases and never found a single case of a bad or toxic effect in patients. And we compare that to drugs today, when the 4th leading cause of death in the United States is doctor-induced injury, usually due to drugs. These treatments were found to treat staph, including drug-resistant staph, pneumonia. Worldwide literature even today coming out of Russia suggests it can be used for tuberculosis. The treatment helps by activating the white blood cells to kill bacteria. Also, by taking perhaps the 7 ounces of blood out of the patient, we expose it to ultraviolet light, and the ultraviolet light inactivates the bacteria that are in the blood. The blood is then given back to the patient, and the immune system sees the inactivated bacteria and can mount a much better immune response. It's like an auto-vaccine for the patient of the very thing that's causing the problem. German literature shows that these treatments increase mitochondrial production of ATP, which is energy, the most critical thing for the body to function. It improves clotting parameters, making the blood less viscous, so you're less likely to clot and have a circulation problem. They lower blood pressure. They raise oxygen delivery to the tissues. They improve cholesterol metabolism, uric acid metabolism, and especially the oxygen delivery to the body. Platelets don't stick together so much, and one of the causes of heart disease is platelet stickiness. The Russians are using these therapies, especially ultraviolet therapy, to help patients with vascular disease with great success. There is a book written by William Campbell Douglas called Into the Light. I strongly recommend that you get that book. It is available. It's in print, and it details the American experience in this therapy of 40 and 50 years ago. The treatment is making a resurgence today. There are hundreds of doctors doing the treatment now. I teach it at conferences around the country, and I'm really happy to tell you that ultraviolet and ozone are probably my most favorite treatments to do because they have apparently a complete lack of toxicity. The patients do exceptionally well. It is very useful for a variety of diseases, from circulation problems to infection to chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, simply because of the beneficial effect that the therapy has on the metabolic processes of the body. It improves enzyme processes, it kills unwanted bacteria, it improves oxygen, and it improves circulation parameters, all virtually risk-free. We were just talking about oxidation therapy, and I want to elaborate on some of my concerns. We're seeing a horrible rise in worldwide infections. There's the Ebola virus, there's AIDS, there's staph bacteria that are resistant to virtually every antibiotic. There are fears that there will be plagues. Our population is getting more dense, there's air travel, and we hear all the time of threats of terrorists dropping clouds of anthrax or other bad diseases that could spread through society, and with the jet age it could travel very quickly. Germs are becoming resistant to antibiotics, just like bugs become resistant to pesticides. The problem will only get worse. The beauty of the oxidation therapies is there's never been a reported case of resistance. Germs have had thousands of years to get resistant to ultraviolet. They can't. There's only a few bacteria that can survive in the air. Ozone kills bacteria. Can they develop resistance to that? Not very easily. These are treatments that augment the immune system and kill bacteria by nature's mechanism of killing bacteria. Ultraviolet is nature's cleanser. It's ultraviolet that breaks down chemicals in the environment. It's unlikely the bacteria will get resistant to it because, as I've said, they've had 4 billion years to do so, and we haven't seen it yet. I am concerned that there will be plagues going around the world in the not-too-distant future. There are plagues now of influenza that travel around. My patients will come in and get one of these treatments, and they can usually be better within hours to a day or two. Sometimes we have to give a second treatment, but that's not very common. These therapies, I believe, will be the cornerstone of protecting mankind from the coming plagues and resistant infections that are here now. They're not coming, they're here now. Another hot topic today is diseases of children. We are seeing epidemics now in children of asthma, of atopic disease, which is eczema, of hyperactivity, attention deficit, and autism. The rate of autism in our young population has gone from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 300 in some communities. Asthma has been reported to affect up to 23% of vaccinated children. Atopic disease, eczema, may occur in 20 to 30% of children. Hyperactivity is rampant, and even here in Anchorage, Alaska, it's estimated that well over 10% of the school children here are on a Schedule II legend drug, Ritalin. It's an amphetamine. Why are these things happening? I see a lot of these cases, and the majority of them get well, including autism. Many children are not breastfed. They're giving a cow's milk formula. They could be allergic to it, and a manifestation of the allergy could be ear infections. In general, they're treated as if they have a deficiency genetically of an antibiotic instead of the problem allergen that they're being exposed to. They're given antibiotic after antibiotic. This kills the good germs in their gut. Remember, we had talked about colon hydrotherapy and gut toxicity. Well, if you kill the good germs in the gut and fungus, yeast, and toxic germs grow, you break down the lining of the intestine, and the children then can get food allergic and get toxic products of bacteria leaking into the system. They also can become overloaded with yeast. Any woman knows if she takes an antibiotic, she can get a vaginal yeast infection. Same thing goes for the intestinal tract. Unfortunately, the kids are not being treated for the cause of the problem. They are getting a Band-Aid approach with antibiotics. The treatment approach should include elimination of the allergen, cleansing the gut, getting the kids off of the terrible standard American diet, cutting down grains. Some kids have a very bad problem with gluten-containing grains, and getting them off of the antibiotics. Vaccinations are another major issue. I am willing to exempt any child from vaccinations in the state of Alaska under my powers as a physician and state law upon request. The reason why I'm willing to do that is because to this date, the highest health official in the state has not given me any study, or given the legislature, our own legislature asked for this, a study demonstrating that all of the vaccines given to children confer less risk than not receiving the vaccines at all. In other words, the question I put out to the state authorities is the overall morbidity and mortality. Morbidity means all-cause illness. All-cause, that would include the communicable diseases, but it would also include attention deficit, hyperactivity, asthma, eczema, autoimmune disease, cancer, autism. These are called the 5 A's of immunization. Autoimmune disease, asthma, atopic disease, autism, and there's got to be a 5th one somewhere. Has there ever been a study looking at the all-cause morbidity and mortality in a large group of vaccinated children versus unvaccinated children? The answer is no. And until that's done, we cannot say that the mass vaccinations are safe. In fact, as I mentioned, there are studies now that show that there is an enormous rise, epidemic rise, in allergies, asthma, and eczema in vaccinated kids. Diabetes is associated with certain vaccines. Autism almost always seems to follow vaccines. Yes, there was autism before mass vaccines, but it was 1 in 10,000. Now it's about 1 in 350 or so in California, and that's a tragic epidemic. For that reason, I encourage parents not to vaccinate their children. I don't call it immunization because the only real form of immunization is to get the wild disease, meaning wild measles. I had measles when I was a kid. I am now fully immunized. I will never get it again. But unfortunately, the children of today are receiving synthetic vaccines that are loaded with chemical preservatives and mercury. The measles vaccine does not confer permanent immunity, and I shudder to think what will happen to the younger population in 20 years when the immunity wears off and they could get exposed as an adult to a disease they should have had as a child. Furthermore, the amount of mercury and other preservatives in these vaccines is very dangerous. It exceeds U.S. government recommendations for the amount of mercury that a child should receive for the first 6 months of life in his diet and daily living. Yet it's given in injection form that can go directly to the brain and nervous system. The vaccines have animal viruses, animal proteins, and it's no wonder that we're seeing a very bad rise in overall illness, chronic fatigue, arthritis, autoimmune disease, and others in our young population from the forced mass vaccines. The next topic is vitamin C. Linus Pauling promoted vitamin C many years ago and was laughed at, but now his work is being borne out. Many doctors like me give large doses of intravenous vitamin C as well as vitamin C by mouth. There are good studies that show that the larger amount of vitamin C you get in your diet from natural sources, the healthier you are in all parameters. This has been done with the work of Dr. Emanuel Churaskin. I give large amounts of vitamin C intravenously. I can find it exceptionally useful for treating infectious disease. I usually will give an oxidation therapy, and I may or may not combine it with a high-dose vitamin C IV. For the doctors who don't have the oxidation therapies available, they'll give vitamin C, and they will get wonderful results. Vitamin C also works as a chelator, and it's being a weak chelator, you can use it intravenously in a form of chelation therapy that can help with vascular disease. Vitamin C, I find, can be very useful for cancer in massive amounts. I'm not sitting here and telling you that vitamin C will cure cancer, but there are good researchers scattered around the country now who are studying giving 100 grams of vitamin C on a daily basis to cancer, and they are reporting some very significant and in some cases monumental results. Vitamin C augments the immune system. It does likely have toxic properties against cancer cells because it can get metabolized into hydrogen peroxide within a cancer cell. As I mentioned, it's a weak chelator, it's an immune modulator, and it's a detoxifier. It is one of the body's premier antioxidants. Most doctors who do this type of medicine around the country do offer vitamin C in amounts ranging from perhaps 5 to 10 grams up to 100 grams for very sick people. It is a very safe treatment. There is the most remote risk of kidney problems from a kidney stone. I've never seen it in 15 years of practice, and most of my colleagues have not, and I believe that any danger from vitamin C causing this is over-exaggerated and rare. Are you headed for surgery? There is a real place for surgery. I believe that drugs are overused, as I said, and there might be many unnecessary surgical procedures, but surgery is really legitimate. If you are headed for surgery, you need to know that hospitals have very inadequate diets. They don't even, the nutrition in hospital diets, in my opinion, is not enough for general maintenance, let alone to try and restore and repair damaged tissue or support the immune system. Nutrition is critical, and there are studies that show that when patients are supplemented with nutrients, their hospital stay is much better. It's shorter and they heal better. Additionally, I talked about oxidation therapy. Going back 50 years, patients were prepared with ultraviolet blood irradiation therapy before and after surgery, and their hospital stays were largely uneventful. They healed fast and complete with few complications and few infections. In my practice, I prepare all of my patients headed for surgery with intravenous nutrition, largely vitamin C, minerals, and B vitamins, and I also prepare them with either ozone or ultraviolet blood irradiation therapy. This augments their immune system, helps with oxygen delivery, and prepares their body so that when it is stressed, they have extra reserve to heal. In doing this for many years, I have not seen one complication from any of my patients in over 10 years who has gone to surgery. In fact, I had one patient who had a total hip replacement done. She did not require any pain medication. On the second hospital day, she told me that doctors came down and wondered how she was standing up and walking around without any pain and was ready to leave the hospital in just 2 days. She tried to explain to them what I did, which was oxidation therapy and intravenous nutrition before she came in, along with some vitamin supplements. They didn't want to hear it, and they walked out. A hot topic today is cell phones and electromagnetic fields. Many people were laughed at for talking about the impact of electromagnetic fields on the body, especially ELF, extremely low frequency waves. The resonance of these waves matches the resonance of DNA. And Navy studies done many years ago indicate that you can alter biological processes with electromagnetic energy. We now have cellular phones putting out 900 megahertz right next to the brain. The brain absorbs this. It can absorb up to 50% of the energy. And I believe we will see a catastrophe in the coming years from cellular phones causing brain injury. Not just cellular phones, but the phones in your household that are cordless phones. They also put out electromagnetic fields. Electromagnetic fields are coming from cellular towers, from household appliances, from radio towers, even from your television. Now, that's not to say that we need to go back to the 18th century. I'm not saying that at all, but we need to be cognizant of these fields and remove ourselves from them as far as possible. The jury, they say, is out on the impact of these informal studies. They've tried to look at high-tension power lines causing leukemia. One study says yes, another study says no. But there are studies that show that electromagnetic fields increase free radical generation in the body, and that these energies are absorbed by cells and can cause disruptions in biologic processes. I believe that we should be very prudent, use cellular phones to a bare minimum, and keep ourselves from electromagnetic fields as much as possible. I've been asked to talk to you about bioenergetic fields in the body. Orthodox medicine tends to frown on this. Years ago, the American Medical Association's position on acupuncture was that it is, quote, placebo, end quote. Now we know better. There are acupuncture meridians that run through the body. The Chinese have known about this for thousands of years, and now we're accepting this as truth. But they're not necessarily vessels as we know them, or nerves as we know them physically. They're channels of electrical or electromagnetic energy, subtle energies that run through the body in accordance with what the Chinese have talked about for thousands of years. I believe this is very true. There are techniques and machines that can measure acupuncture points, and they do have a different electrical constant and electrical resistance than surrounding skin. Why? Because there is an electrical charge or an energy that's running through them. Acupuncture is known to activate various body processes. Many people believe it's directly through the autonomic nervous system, the unconscious nervous system that we call the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. This is true. It does have those effects. But the interesting thing for me is, if a patient comes to me with low back pain, intractable low back pain, and they have an interference in a tooth that the acupuncture charts say is related to the large intestine, and the large intestine has nerves coming out of the back, tell me how that tooth is neurologically connected with the low back. Yet when I treat the tooth, remove it, or put a small amount of a local anesthetic in the tooth, the distant pain goes away instantly. And then I know that that disturbance is causing a problem at a distant site. This could be a factor in what we call subtle energies within the body. Physics is now demonstrating that there are bioenergetic fields of energy that go through our cells. A man named Bjorn Nordstrom has demonstrated that there are currents of energy going in the cells and out of the cells through the circulation system and out. In fact, he's treated cancer simply by putting a needle in the cancer and putting an electrical charge on it. And the cancer cells can become normal with one electric charge, or regenerate back to cancer, I should say degenerate back to cancer, by putting the opposite electric charge in it. Robert Becker wrote a book called The Body Electric, and he showed that a mammal, yes, a mammal, a mouse, can partially regenerate an amputated limb by altering the electrical fields around the amputation site. This, to me, is where we should be going with medicine, because the body creates these energy fields. We know that there are energy fields around the body. Kirlian photography can photograph them. Some people call it the aura. For medical and scientific reasons, I prefer to call it the energy field. We know it's there. If the body generates the energy field, physics tells us that if we have an impact on the energy field, it will also affect the body, because they are one and the same. We talked about colon health, and now I'm asked to elaborate a little bit on parasites. Parasites are animal creatures that do not live in symbiosis with us like most bacteria do. Most bacteria live in harmony with us. We help them, they help us. In fact, bacteria make vitamin K, which is responsible for clotting and bone health. Without the bacteria, we would be deficient. Parasites are animal creatures like protozoa or worms that can get into the system, and they can be subclinical. The most noted one here in Alaska is Giardia, or beaver fever. And drinking out of Alaska lakes or streams, we can get this, and it can cause severe intestinal upset. But it also could be subsymptomatic, subclinical, where you don't even know you have it, especially with worms. This is a real problem worldwide. The immune system often can take care of it, but often it cannot, especially with the more sophisticated organisms. You could have roundworms, pinworms, whipworms, protozoa in the gut. These can be associated with a wide variety of chronic disease. And some people believe and I'm not saying I do, that they're directly tied in with cancer. I believe that they could be tied in with cancer in that the presence of parasites suppresses the immune system. The parasites are there, the immune system doesn't like it, it gets busy trying to deal with the parasites but can't get rid of it, and then other bad problems happen in the body because the immune system is busy looking at something else. I believe that's probably real. Parasites can be checked, but even if your parasite test is negative, you could still have them because they can be very difficult to detect even in the very best labs. There are herbs that can treat parasites. I'm not in favor of drugs generally because I believe that the parasites can go deeper into the system either bioenergetically or physically. I tend to like to use herbs first. I do use drugs where necessary. Colon hydrotherapy is very good for cleansing the colon. But most everybody somewhere along the line ought to be checked for parasites if they're having any type of chronic disease process, whether it's in the intestines or elsewhere. Chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. Chronic fatigue is one of my favorite things to treat, and I'm more happy to see that come into the office than anything else, even though most physicians cringe because they don't know what to do with it. If you go back and take a look at what I said in the beginning, the fundamental causes of disease, malnutrition, toxics, and stress, you can then see where there are negative impacts on the immune system. Chronic fatigue, in my opinion, is a combination of many things that cause the immune system to degenerate so that it cannot properly take care of the body. These could include toxics first. It could be a combination of 1 or 100 different things, all that combine. Mercury in the teeth. Mercury is a known poison. It leaches out of teeth and it permeates the body and causes known immune dysfunction and brain dysfunction. Now, maybe 1 part per million of mercury isn't going to be a problem. Maybe 1 part of DDT per million isn't going to be a problem. And PCB, as industry would have you believe, these are not in high enough concentrations. But what if you have 1 part per million of 30,000 different chemicals or toxins? Now all of a sudden you have a toxic soup because you have enough of all of them and they magnify. There are articles in the literature showing how these toxins not only magnify each other, but multiply each other exponentially, so that a small part of mercury and lead that might not cause any problem by themselves, when given in combination, can be very lethal. When you add all of the toxics together, it's no wonder that people are feeling bad. Well, that's toxics. What about nutrition? Most people, as I said, are nutritionally deficient. If we get the right nutrition into them, their bodies can start coming alive. And then when you combine it with an oxidation therapy that helps to detoxify and activate the system, you can see, in my opinion, miracles with chronic fatigue. Chronic fatigue has causes: malnutrition, toxics, which then lead to organ and immune failure. If we address the causes of this and not put more chemicals into the system, I believe we will see the majority of these cases get better, and that also includes fibromyalgia. I've been asked to talk about impotence. Impotence is a failure in the man to achieve an erection sufficient for sexual intercourse. Women, fortunately for themselves, don't have to worry about that, but men do. Impotence probably has many causes. It could be toxic, it could be hormonal, and it can be circulatory. Today, the treatment of impotence in men centers around a drug called Viagra. And yes, Viagra works. There's no doubt about it. It does have problems, though, and it's not really addressing the cause. We're seeing today in men, in my opinion, an epidemic of hormone dysfunction. Testosterone levels are declining. And in fact, low testosterone levels are a major cause of heart disease. One of the biggest risk factors for heart disease, predictive risk factors, is a man who cannot get an erection. That man could be headed for heart disease because testosterone levels are very important for the function of the heart. Testosterone itself raises the production of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a vasodilator. which is important for heart function and blood supply to the penis for filling, for erection. Low levels of testosterone can lead to low libido and low nitric oxide. Other circulation problems. We have an epidemic of circulation problems in this country in both men and women, not just in the coronary disease and the carotids, which go to the brain, but also if it can be in the heart or if it can be in the carotid artery, it can be in the pelvis and reduce blood circulation to the penis. Treatments for that would include cleaning up the body and addressing all of the factors I spoke about earlier, such as chelation therapy, oxidation therapy, and anything we can do to improve the circulation. There are many herbs that can be used as an alternative to Viagra. Royal maca is one, yohimbe is another. It depends upon the individual which one I might choose. Zinc is deficient in many men, and zinc is essential for normal testicular function, testosterone production, and sperm production. We should be checking zinc levels in patients and also making sure they're not toxic with cadmium, which interferes with zinc, or other heavy metals. There are other ways to treat impotence. I find that the psychological aspect is a major factor. Since Viagra came out, that's been downplayed. They started saying that it's all physiologic, but I know many men who take a small amount of Viagra and they can get an erection and perform sexually, and after they do that for 2 or 3 times, they don't need the Viagra again. What does that say? That says that something happened to the man that caused a fear, an anxiety, or a psychological disturbance that did cause a physiologic dysfunction. When the man took the Viagra and was able to achieve an erection and perform for a couple times, the fear then was gone and he was able to function normally afterwards. I think there's a wonderful case for the use of Viagra for this because it has helped a lot of men recover normal sexual function and they didn't need the Viagra anymore. But surely the psychological aspects have to be looked at, and a good partnership between a man and a woman is absolutely essential. There has to be love on both sides. The woman needs to be very loving, understanding, and sensitive to the man, as the man has to be to the woman. I'll also add that simply because one or both partners cannot perform sexually for sexual intercourse, in my opinion, is not a reasonable excuse for not maintaining sexual intimacy, because there are many other ways to maintain sexual intimacy and the wonderful male-female contact besides sexual intercourse. Another fascinating topic is glandular therapy, or live cell therapy. It was discovered many years ago that if you suspended an extract of cells from an animal and gave it back to a human being by injection, you could ameliorate the symptoms that were generated by that person's loss of an organ. I believe this was first done with the parathyroids. The parathyroids are small glands that sit right in the back of the thyroid here, and sometimes they can be damaged or removed during thyroid surgery. And the first researcher who looked at this ground up some parathyroid tissue from an animal and injected it into a patient who was having severe reactions to low calcium because his parathyroids had been damaged or removed, and he recovered. The concept here, and this was pioneered by a man named Nihans in Europe, is that the cells, when prepared properly from an animal, convey an energy and a nutrition to a target organ. The cells were radio-labeled with a radioactive isotope and then administered by injection. It was found that the radioactive isotope did not just diffuse throughout the body haphazardly, but concentrated in the target organ. In other words, if you had a gland of thyroid that was a glandular material of thyroid that was radioactively labeled, the radioactivity would concentrate in the thyroid as if the body in its own wisdom knew where to take the energy and nutrition of that substance. In Europe, this was given for many years. Many Americans went over to Europe because it was not easy to get in this country for rejuvenation therapy to help their immune system or help revive organs. There is a large variety of glandular therapy. There is oral therapy with glandulars that come from animals. It could be liver, it could be adrenal, it could be heart, and they all contain nutrients and factors that help support that particular organ. In Germany, there's a product called Regenerism. It's pronounced in German Regenerism. It is ribonucleic acid, which is extracted from organs and given back to a patient, and the ribonucleic acid activates the synthesis of proteins that otherwise might not be present due to a genetic deficiency in the human or organ failure. I have seen this work. It can be especially useful in genetic diseases. In Europe, they would also take suspensions of cells and give it to patients for heart problems, liver problems, adrenal problems, and the idea is to imbue the organ with more energy and vitality. Is there validity to it? Yes. Is it a cure-all? No. It's much cheaper to take by mouth, the tablets. The injections are more expensive. They are now available in this country in various forms, but it would have to be administered by a doctor, and there are only a few preparations that are available due to medical legal reasons. But many patients are interested in this, and you don't have to leave the country anymore to go to Mexico or Europe, because there are preparations that are available by injection here that can help you out.